special thanks for Mr. McCormick for assigning this project. Over to Caitlin.
Today's presentation is on resources in America's past, present, and future. We will cover soil resources currently available and how America is managing these resources. We will also take a look at the future of American agriculture and soil resources. In this video, we will cover soil loss due to development, genetically modified organisms, and modern agriculture, past agriculture, and the future of soil. Soil is important to today's resources and society because it is not just dirt but a nutrient and organism-rich substance essential for regulating water, filtering pollutants, cycling nutrients, providing stability for roots, and sustaining plant and animal life. 95% of our food sources come from soil. The future of soil in America is dependent on the work of all citizens, from farmers and people who work in the industry to consumers and regular people. There are many solutions to the problem, and we will cover those which we think would be most appropriate. And we'll cover the pros and cons of the issue. Farming in America's past was vastly different than the industry that exists today. Native Americans belonged to either hunting and gathering groups, or those who practiced established farming. Common techniques included slash and burn farming, which took up vast amounts of land but restored vital nutrients to the soil. And terraced farming, practiced by the Incas to tame steep mountainsides and grow crops. In the past, soil erosion has been such a serious issue for agriculture practices of the time did not include modern technologies such as crop rotation. For example, part of the downfall of Rome was caused by severe soil degradation and depletion of nutrients, making growing food for the empire nearly impossible.
Agricultural practices of the time generally led to harsh, overworked soil, as societies attempted to spend more time building impressive structures and taking for granted their limited resources for food. However, mass production and the overtaking of vast swaths of land wasn't generally a problem. Farming tended to be more local and less merchandised, therefore efficiency was fairly low. At the time, this wasn't an issue because of lower population numbers, which meant less land was needed to feed less people. People also tended to grow food primarily for human consumption and grew plants native to the area. The concept of mass production agriculture for the purpose of feeding animals raised for another industry is a fairly new concept. Some crops that are native to the Americas include potato, squash, avocado, cocoa, cacao, papaya, peanuts, quinoa, pineapple, tomato, different types of cotton, and sweet potato. Certain crops that aren't necessarily native to the Americas create serious erosion problems that cause the soil to lose its ability to maintain itself. Those crops include coffee, cotton, tobacco, tea, wheat, and soybean. Soil erosion problems were identified by few in earlier U.S. history. However, westward expansion meant a vast source of new land and fresh soil, so policymakers gave erosion little attention. By the 1800s, farmers' exploitation and abandonment of land was a common occurrence, especially given the extreme profitability of the plantation system. However, cash crops soon made land virtually unusable. As the population grew, outdated agricultural practices became a serious problem. An example of overworking soil in the American past is the Dust Bowl, where millions of tons of topsoil from American farms in the Midwest became loose and completely depleted of nutrients, leading to huge storms of giant dust clouds carried on by the winds. Accompanied by a severe drought, hundreds of farmers and their families were thrown into severe poverty like thousands of others during the Great Depression. This was the first time in history that the future of American soil was truly brought to the public's attention. At the time, Franklin Delano Roosevelt recognized the gravity of the situation and worked to implement government projects such as the Great Plains Conservation Program. Erosion conditions were evaluated in 1934, and 6 months later, Congress passed the Soil Conservation Act establishing the Soil Conservation Service under the United States Department of Agriculture. The Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1933 marked a major shift towards direct government involvement in farming and preservation. The act allowed the USDA to enter voluntary agreements with farmers to remove land from production in exchange for compensation. Congress also formed the Soil Erosion Service, which authorized funds to combat erosion. However, in 1936, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled the Agricultural Adjustment Act as unconstitutional on the claim that the act's provisions for production control were coercive. During the 1960s and 1970s, the American public became deeply concerned about environmental issues and problems facing the public. An extremely influential event was the publication of Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. The book highlighted the devastational effects of harsh pesticides such as DDT on the environment, and the deaths of animals and plants due to its use. The book was so revolutionary that the use of DDT was banned.
Regarding the strides made via agricultural technology took place after the 1950s. The tractor has been a large influence on present-day farming culture. However, the first successful gasoline tractor was built in the United States in 1892. Following its invention in 1907, nearly 600 tractors were in use, yet by 1950, almost 3.4 million tractors in the United States were being used. Some changes made to the tractor include the power takeoff, which was implemented through a special shaft, and it enabled farmers to cultivate planted crops mechanically. The rubber tires allowed for faster operating speeds, switched to four-wheel drive, and diesel power. Having double tires on each wheel and having enclosed air-conditioned cabs, the grain combine came to be in the United States in 1836. A one-man combine powered by the two-plow-sized tractor was made in 1935, followed by the self-propelled machine in 1938. Today, tractors are a major pillar of modern agriculture, and many farms could not function without them. However, tractors use fossil fuels such as gasoline and oil, making them a major contribution to pollution in air. American farmlands are quickly running out of reusable soil. When the fields are left uncultivated and forests are clear-cut for agriculture and grazing, the soil in these areas undergo heavy erosion due to exposure to the elements. Along with an increase in soil degradation from pesticide use, the soil in the United States disappears 10 times faster than it can be replaced. The total amount of lost productivity due to soil erosion cost the U.S. economy $44 billion a year. Soil loss and erosion is the loss of soil and the degradation of the quality of the soil. Good soil is generally dark in color, moist, and contains hundreds of nutrients and bacteria that are essential for the health and benefit of plants and animals. Many of these nutrients are restored to the soil through rain and natural cycles, such as the nitrogen and carbon cycles. Another way nutrients are added to the soil is through decomposition of natural matter, such as dead plants and animals. The issue at hand is one of supply and demand. While these processes are very effective, they take lots of time, up to thousands of years, to slow steady breakdown of carbon-based life forms. Additionally, bacteria plays an essential role in the quality of soil, but severe chemical treatment of crops and soil contributes to the mass destruction of bacteria present in the soil. There are many factors which can cause soil erosion and degradation, such as natural causes like rain and rainwater runoff, the steepness and hilliness of the land, lack of vegetation, and wind. However, there are many issues which are caused by human beings. As previously mentioned, pesticides used by farmers to help prevent the growth of weeds and other deterrents to try to rid the land of common pests can make the land and soil weak and depleted of nutrients.
Like what happened with the Dust Bowl, topsoil has become increasingly drier and poor. There are many issues associated with weak topsoil. Some of them include difficulty of retaining nutrients and moisture, which makes it difficult to grow and sustain crops. There are many other far-reaching and problematic effects as well. Dust residue causes serious respiratory illness, and drinking water can become contaminated with pesticide residue. Since the invention of the plow, the tillage method, breaking up and turning over soil, then adding organic compost or chemical fertilizers, has been utilized to supplement the problem of weak soil. As convenient as tillage is, it harms the ecosystem and exposes the microorganisms that depend on the soil. It also loosens the soil, making it easier for it to be blown or washed away. Over time, more than 50% of America's topsoil has eroded away. Experts predict that at the current rates of erosion, only 60 years of farming remain. All of this eroded soil has ended up in our air and water. All of this has effects on the agriculture industry as well. As soil compaction and soil acidity levels increase, plants will not reproduce, and the profit that can be gained from the crop is negligible. In our global society, soaring prices in the grocery store can lead to fewer consumer purchases, only aggravating the issue and decreasing profits. Genetic modification of crops plays a large role in plant breeding. There are two main categories of genetically modified crops, which are insect-resistant and herbicide-tolerant. Herbicide-tolerant crops let farmers spray herbicides more effectively without harming their crops. Nearly 75% of genetically modified crops are herbicide-tolerant, and the most common are soybeans, canola, corn, and cotton. One of the major problems regarding insect-resistant and herbicide-tolerant crops is that their long-term use can cause insects to become resistant to the toxins. This will cause for new technologies needed to be created frequently. Instead of trying to regulate soil use and finding ways to grow more responsibly, engineers have instead been tasked with genetically modifying the crops to grow larger with less nutrients and water. Often this has resulted in compromises on taste and nutritional value of the plant at hand. The public has raised concerns, some valid and some less so, over both the appropriateness and necessity of growing genetically modified organisms. Some of the problems with GMOs include the fact that many of the plants are bred for increased pesticide resistance, meaning that more pesticides are ending up on the crops and the soil becomes even more depleted. And weeds become more resistant to pesticides, creating a need for more use. Some GMOs actually modify the nature of the plant, such as the alteration of fatty acid composition in canola. Today, genetic modification is being practiced on animals as well. Techniques for decreasing the time it takes for certain salmons to reach maturity so that they can be harvested sooner.
The need for GMOs has become evident. This map represents why so many GMOs are being needed because along with climate change, more of America is drought prone. This map represents areas of the United States where the water table is less than 6 inches. This means that topsoils in these areas can retain no more than 6 inches of water. As you can see, much of these areas are agriculture-heavy areas, such as California, which is responsible for the growth of almonds and many other fruits that are essential for America's year-round consumption.
Wasted food is progressively becoming more of a problem each day. Nearly 1/3 of food that's being produced worldwide goes to waste. However, this problem can be resolved if more people plan their meals and carefully manage the scraps that they have. Vegetable scraps and meat bones can both be used to make broth for soups, and any mushy fruit scraps can be used for smoothies. Stale bread can be used for breadcrumbs or French toast, and most food scraps can also contribute to fertilize a garden later on if they have been composted. Organic farming is rapidly increasing due to the attraction of it by many people. It is becoming popular to many people because the crops or livestock are grown or raised without the use of toxic pesticides, synthetic hormones, antibiotics, or GE. People like organic foods because they feel safer knowing that their foods are being grown without harmful substances being put into them. Organic farmers are also happy because they save money not buying expensive chemicals or equipment. On top of saving money, they also gain more money because they can sell their products at a higher price. Organic farming will also be better for the soil because the farmers are using more all-natural methods of growing crops. Acts towards preservation are essential in decreasing current erosion rates and moving towards sustainability in farming practices. Means towards preservation include planting more trees, limiting tillage and plowing, crop rotation, controlling water runoff, stabilizing plant life, and reducing animal agriculture. Because erosion occurs more easily without plant or tree cover, prioritizing the preservation of forests and planting more trees will aid in soil preservation. Other ways include specific farming practices such as crop rotation to allow for organic matter to build up or the utilization of conservation agriculture, which is a zero-tillage farming practice that involves cover crops being planted immediately after harvest to protect and return nutrients back into the soil. Water control systems such as specialized runoff pipes and chutes reduce runoff erosion as well. Another erosion reduction idea is the use of terraces. Terraces are sloped plains that have been cut into a series of successively receding flat surfaces. Introducing terraces not only reduces water runoff but also stabilizes plant life by providing plants with a flat surface. Because of the use of land to grow food for animals has large amounts of land solely for the purpose of growing food for the animals. Promoting a plant-based diet or even a reduction in the consumption of animal products would significantly reduce the land utilized for agriculture. Vertical farming is also a promising solution because it has the potential to grow fresh food in skyscrapers in big cities where the population will grow faster than space can accommodate for. These buildings would be able to create space since the food would be able to grow year-round. Transportation of food would decrease since it is being grown within a metropolitan area, and it can also reduce the need of pesticides, fertilizers, and water.
There has been recent government involvement intending on advancing soil preservation. For example, as part of the 1984 Food Security Act, income support for farmers is only provided on the premise that they adopt conservation practices, particularly on land more susceptible to eroding. Congress also established the Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP, which pays farmers to take highly erodible land out of production. Despite the CRP's mass efforts to reduce erosion, little influence has actually been made on the state of the soil crisis. The CRP's agreements only last 10 years, and between 2007 and 2014, more than 15.8 million acres were not re-enrolled after the contracts expired. So despite the fact that 10 years ago, more land was in the CRP than the acreage of the entire state of New York, the widespread implementation of the program is dying out. One primary reason is the fact that about a decade ago, farming became more profitable. Critics of the CRP's methods also claim that when land is removed from the 10-year contract, the benefits from the preservation efforts are lost rather quickly, and that the program would be more effective if the government brought long-term legal restrictions on the land instead of just renting it short-term. Government programs may aid the situation by encouraging farmers to follow preservation practices. However, these implements are not enough to solve the soil crisis on its own. The problem is up to us to fix. As consumers, research and comparison and informed decisions about situations regarding land development and GMO consumption are key. Easy decisions, such as buying an existing home rather than building a new one on new land, or understanding which GMOs are harmful to the environment rather than helpful, means that as a population, little fixes can add up to a big solution.
Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to see more, like and subscribe. Shout out to Jimmy Johns and FarmersOnly.com. These are our sources, Mr. McCormick.